Hey everybody, welcome to the Art of Comics. I'm your host, Andres, and we're going to talk about Alex Toth. This is part 7. So excited to have you guys here with him, man. This is the COVID-19 pandemic, and yet you were here with me. We're talking about one of my favorite artists of all time, Toth, Sienkiewicz. Who's third? I don't have time for that. We'll worry about who's third. Huge fan of this guy's work, and I'm glad that you guys stuck around for episode 7. If you haven't listened to the others, watch the others. Go check those others out. Last episode, we talked about Zorro, and we shared the reprinting that Image did for the Zorro book. Now we're going to start on the second book of this trilogy that IDW came out with, this one called Genius Illustrated. And we're going to also jump into this one as well, because we're going to start into where Alex gets into his animation career. And so we're going to get into some Space Ghosts, Herculoids, that kind of thing today as well. So let's start with this book here, and let's go where we left off. So as you recall, in episode 6, Alex was so excited to do Zorro. This was like his jam. He was all about Zorro. He did all this research. He went to the sets. But as we saw and read about, he started getting conflicts with the writers, with editorial, with how things were turning up. And so he didn't feel he had the creative, I think, freedom to really do this type of Zorro stories that he wanted. So he left that gig. And so now he's kind of looking for work. Okay, and we'll just keep going. You know, stuff like this, I love this, like, older, this is an 81. I love this kind of very simple line work that he does. Very shape, blocky, oriented stuff. This is all good, too. These are panels. Hell, these could be panels for, like, a, Wally Wood 24 panels that always work type of a sheet. In fact, maybe I should make something like that with this now that I've just uttered that, because these are some really cool panels. We're going to talk about Bravo too in a future episode, because I bought that just recently as well. So we start out talking about he separated from his wife, Christine. He separated from her. He got a little place in Pasadena. He needs that quiet time. He needs to control his environment. So he moves out on his own. He's in Pasadena. His kids and wife are in another part of LA. I don't recall where. I think in the valley somewhere, Van Nuys or someplace. So he's on his own, looking for work. And so he did a few comics, and he started doing this. He did boards for a short film called Angry Red Planet. And so I'm going to show you these right here. This is Angry Red Planet. These are the storyboards he did. And unfortunately, the reproduction, there's just probably some kind of a graphite or pencil that we're getting copies of. But great detail and great work. This is not the storyboards that you have seen other artists do, right? Which are much more looser, stick figure. These are like fully rendered, like cleaned up pieces of artwork. He really enjoys this project. Here's a poster for it, Angry Red Planet. He really enjoys this, and he kind of like maybe starts dabbling in the animation world. This is where it kind of like he does this tilt, this shift from comics, which by this time he's worked at, National, which becomes DC. He worked at Timely, which becomes Marvel. He worked at Standard Comics. He worked with Dell and Western, which also did Zorro. I mean, he's worked with all these major companies, and he keeps getting kind of impeded in his creativity. So he goes into this animation world and does that stuff. Before, though, we get into the animation specifically, he does do some freelancing work. And so while he is looking for work, he does some freelance stuff. Now, also remember that in the 60s, there's a huge backlash for the crime and horror comics. And so crime and horror comics are getting kind of low sales. There's a lot of backlash. So what's big now is that's where he kind of turns into animation, because a lot of the horror stuff and things that he was good at, low sales. Also remember that he didn't like spandex so much. Now he's going to wind up in the future, we'll see, he'll do some Super Friends stuff for animation and things, but it's reported numerous times that he's not a big superhero guy. That's just not his wheelhouse or what was his interest. So that's why he didn't go back to DC and do a lot of work. Although we'll see a couple things. One of the things I wanted to mention was the style choices and how he really modulates his art work for the project, for the style of the story. So I love this, again, like I was saying before, I love this kind of blocky, kind of simplified lines. And then this is really great stuff too. He's got some Wally Wood moments, which I'm going to mention in a moment when I get into it. I mean, but this art looks very different, right, than this right here. And this is around the same time, 57, 60. So, so around the same time, he's really kind of modulating his art style, which I thought was really cool. This is a fun story here. I like this as well. This has got this South Pacific kid who can like speak with the marine animals, has kind of some ability to commune with them. Needs to go on this boat trip to the other island with the elder and this kind of tribal leader. The leader's like, hey, I don't want this little kid to go with me. He relents. He goes. The leader falls in the water, is gonna get ate. What happens? The boy comes and saves him. And he's like, I'll never again will I look down on the powers of the very old or the very young. I don't know, just kind of a fun story. I like these little 3, 4, 5 page stories. Kind of neat. I wanted to mention this because I think render-wise, this is so clean. This is so well. This right here is, I think it's just crazy. The way the volume, the curves of the hands, the way it shows volume, the details on this. He was not a photography guy, but he must have did a lot of research. He must have did a lot of clippings. I don't know if he had an extensive scrap file like Al Parker or some of those other guys, but he must have had a lot of reference, because you can't just dream this up. You have to see this. But he wasn't a big photo guy, which we'll talk about when he goes to Johnny Quest with Doug Wildley, who was a photography. Used a lot of photography in his comics. I just love the story. It's just really cool. Again, I think this stuff is just clean. These bubbles, I don't know. I just dig it. It sounds silly, but he did some paperback kind of pulp covers as well. This is a fun story. This is like a Twilight Zone type of story where the mean store manager at this toy store or like a Sears Roebuck store is kind of getting on these girls, and then he finds himself transported into as one of these little mannequins, and so he's now a little figure in the world of this little toy saloon, old town, and it's kind of a fun little like what happens to him now, and the guy, the workers are like, oh, where did he go? I don't know where he is, but look at this weird toy here. It looks kind of like him. What's he doing in the barn, sweeping up the hay with the horses? And it's the manager. Kind of cool. He did Rip Hunter. I really like the marks here that he's doing. I thought this was just a really cool way to make these marks. Did some DC work. He did some freelance, a little bit DC work. Although I don't think this doesn't remind me of him. I feel like this is, it doesn't look quite like Toth, so I don't know who inked him on that. But some House of Mystery stuff. Again, not superhero, right? It's more of the real world stuff. But I dig this. So he did these little odd jobs, and I thought of like Canon. This kind of reminded me of kind of a Canon, maybe just because of the strip format. But this was all promotional work for this movie called How to Murder Your Wife, and it's got some fun, kind of cartoony gags and faces and stuff. but a little exaggerated, not totally, but I dig it a lot. And so he's basically just looking for these gigs. Then he hears about, after doing the Red Angered Planet, he then moves over and he gets this gig with Hanna-Barbera. Hanna-Barbera, they were this up and coming studio. They had all these animation gigs, and because they used this kind of limited animation style, which didn't have so many in betweens and it was a little like basic, they could pump out these cartoons relatively cheap. So he got involved in doing some work with them. Now, he wasn't a huge fan actually of Hanna-Barbera. He started working with Doug Wildley, who on Johnny Quest. Now, you might know Doug Wildley from doing his work on Rio, the Western comic. Yeah, so Doug Wildley did this. He did a Rio. This is a great Western, and I should probably review this another time. But this is a lot of fun. So he did this. So he came from Comic Book World, and he started this show, which we all know, Johnny Quest. Now, they didn't necessarily get along. One of the things that he has an issue of, he mentions that he called him a Polaroid artist, and that he thought that using the camera so much, using these references was, you didn't do that. You didn't copy from photographs. And he talked about how Noel Sickles would not do that when he was working for the Saturday Evening Post and things like that. And so he also didn't like that Wildley would sit and draw on the couch with his kids watching TV. And Alex, that's just like opposite, diametrically opposed to that, where, Alex is all about getting his own place away from his family so he could control the quiet, control the environment. So there's just like a different philosophy of art. That said, Toth did some great work, and we're going to talk about in the other book, show you some of those images of what he did, the character designs for that work. After doing that, he then started working on Space Ghost. Now, Space Ghost, another Hanna-Barbera production, had to do some design work on the costume because of the huge popularity of Batman, which I cannot convey to you how amazing and how massive 66 Batman was. But because Batman was so ingrained in our culture at the time, they even kind of remodeled some of that costume to give you some of that work. Now, after that, he goes into working with Herculoids, and this is my personal favorite, and it was his as well. This is where he really had more of a carte blanche to like design the costumes and characters of that show. He also did some more work. This Three Musketeers looked amazing. This sheet specifically would be a great have in your collection. So he's into this kind of period stuff. He's into the swashbuckling, the Errol Flynn, all that kind of thing. That's what he is kind of all about. I mean, look at this. This is not just brilliant stuff. And he did some Fantastic Four things. So he's doing with Hanna-Barbera. I just share this one as well. Talks about his family, talks about relating to the kids. He was, the weekend dad, right? So as they were separated, the divorce wasn't final yet. It does become final. He will wind up remarrying, but as of now, he's seeing the kids on the weekends. It's a challenge for him to relate. They go to the model store. They buy some, model airplanes to work on together. He never does his, though. He just buys them. So there's just a little bit of a disconnect because he was so into his career and the craft. And later on in life, they mention how he did feel the guilt of not being there for his kids. And his kids kind of counteract saying, hey, you taught us about work ethic. You taught us about the things that were important to you that we used in our life. So it's hard being a dad. Being divorced, having kids away is tricky. I know that. Let's jump into here because some of that is covered here. Now, this will kind of go into more of the animation stuff. So this book is specifically about the animation, but I wanted to show you some of these drawings. This is more of read Angry Planet, that we talked about. And also Space Angel, which is some kind of pre-production stuff he did. This is what Alex looks like. So in his later years, that's what his mug looks like. But this stuff is really kind of really well done, rendered, or Okay, so here's a model sheet of the final look of the hood. It was going to be all white, and they kind of made it black. Doug Wildey used to say that they didn't look at comic books when they were doing Johnny Quest. For ideas for the machines, they were looking at popular mechanics, and other magazines they were interested in looking ahead towards the future. He hated Bandit the puppy. He did not want the dog, but I think it was either Hannah or Barbera. One of them were like, "We got to make this kid friendly. We got to do that." But Johnny Quest was not a comic book story. It was supposed to be set in the real world, set in this pulp era with real machinery, with real stuff, which is perfectly what fits Alex and his interests. These are all model sheets. And he mentions that at times it was like homework. It was an effort to get this done because, it's a bit of a grind to pull these all out. But he did all these model sheets. These are all the different minor characters. He would do these equipment pieces. Just brilliant stuff. Here's where we talk about the Batman, how that fad just bled over just popular culture in general. Here's Jane and Jace. Those little characters, I love this. I just love the position of her and her face. Just great stuff. So these model sheets would, they do the different poses. This would be used for the animators. And the animators were never able to really draw as well as Alex. So you got these model sheets, and sometimes they wouldn't even be used. So you got model sheets that Alex poured his heart into that are, superbly crafted, and they would not be used, or they just weren't as good as what he's drawing. And that's just a skill level thing, I think, and time perhaps. But this book is full of character sheets and model sheets. It's kind of crazy. So these are all the different wild characters he did. And then some animation here. We see he was not into dinosaurs. He didn't like Neanderthal caveman stories. He just thought it was ugly, and he just didn't care for it. But they do show some of that. And then we get into some other work. Moby Dick he did, which I've never heard of. Never heard of Moby Dick. I like this costume. It's really good too. It's a great book just to kind of look at these original pieces. There's Shazam. Which is not Shazam, so I just noticed that just now too. But I like this kind of Middle Eastern fantasy stuff. There's the Fantastic Four we saw. Doom, gotta love Doom. You got to, okay? If you don't love Doom, unsubscribe because I'm a Doom dude. Samson anime. So he did all these little animation, and this was his jam. It wasn't storytelling, it wasn't storyboards, it was just doing these model sheets, which he was great at. Here's some Herculoids. I want to show you a little bit of this because I love this stuff. I'm a Herculoids kid, so it was before my time, but I saw repeats, of course. But I just love Gleek and these different characters. Just very simple, and this would be great for animation because he was really able to kind of break it down into these simple shapes. Just very creative, interesting designs and ideas. So I just thought that was just really cool. And then he did some more Birdman, and then I'm probably going to stop around here because I don't want to go farther than my other book. My Tour. Yeah, he's doing caveman stuff. He's not digging that so much. He's going to eventually leave Hanna-Barbera, and we'll stop here, and we'll go into what he does next in the next episode. Hey, thanks guys for watching. I appreciate you guys so much for subscribing, for liking, for commenting, for just checking this out. Again, huge Alex Toth. This is episode 7. We're probably going to have about 12 parts, I'm assuming, as we continue the story. We got one on Bravo, on his EC eerie work. Not EC, sorry, his creepy and eerie stuff for Warren. Got a lot of stuff coming up. So thanks a lot.